The Board of Supervisors of the County of Del Norte and the governing body of all other special assessment and taxing districts for which said board so acts is now meeting in regular session. Only those items that indicate a specific time will be heard at that assigned time. All other items may be taken out of sequence to accommodate the public and staff availability. Kylie, would you take roll?
Supervisor Howard?
Present.
Supervisor Starkey?
Here.
Supervisor Wilson?
Here.
Supervisor Borges?
Here.
Chair Short?
Here. Now, if you would join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, Supervisor Starkey is going to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. Do we have any new, or I'm sorry, if you would, yeah, I skipped our moment of reflection, so if you would join me in that moment of reflection, please. Thank you for that. Do we have any introductions of new employees this morning?
Yes, we do. Chair, the Director of Health and Human Services here today to introduce 2 new employees.
Thank you. Welcome, Renell.
Good morning, Board. We have 2 new employees we're excited to introduce today, so I'm going to invite Program Manager Dorothy Waddle from our Public Assistance team to come up and introduce her employee.
Good morning. I would like to introduce Brianna Dunsing, our new ICW. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology in May of 2021. She moved here to be close to her family and to also assist working in the family business that they have going on here in our county. She is very happy to be working in a field that she went to school for, and she plans to continue her studies and get a master's in criminal psychology.
Very good. Welcome, Brianna.
Thank you. All right, now I'm going to invite our Public Health Program Manager, Sunny Baker, to come up and introduce her employee.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sunny Baker, Public Health Program Manager. So I'd like to introduce our Preslyn Shaw. She's our newest health educator for Coastal Connection. So Preslyn brings the wealth of knowledge and experience from working Rural Human Services, Harrington House, where she serves a vulnerable and high-risk population. We are very excited to have Preslyn join our team, Public Health Branch. Preslyn, please welcome Preslyn. She has some words to share with you.
Hi, my name is Preslyn. I was born and raised here in Crescent City, and I am excited to continue serving my community through the county now, and I am hopeful for the opportunities that it will bring. Thank you.
Very good. Welcome, Preslyn.
Welcome.
Any others, sir? Okay, thank you. Do we have anything to report out of closed session?
Not today, Chair.
Okay, at this time, the chair requests any deletions, corrections, or additions from board members to the agenda. In order to add an item to the agenda, the matter must have come to the attention of the county subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and the matter requires action before the next regular meeting of the board. Is there any such items? Seeing none, we'll move on to brief reports from supervisors, and we'll start with Vice Chair Starkey.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask that Mackenzie throw up a video, and as I talk about this, I just want to highlight what it is that some of our dollars are doing when we send things over to the Visitor Bureau, which is a committee that I'm on. They end up, Mackenzie, if you could turn the volume, thank you so much. And I have this posted on my Facebook so you could see it all in full, but I just want to say that when a couple years ago they had the insight to hire a marketing, and so it's Lynette Braillard, and she's been doing a great job in marketing our region. And I want to just tell you a little backstory about how this segment came about. This is Davy Sutton and her film crew featuring the Tallawahd Nations and the Yurok. And it all started with a pitch that Lynette made to experience Native California in Del Norte County, and she made that to the Visitor Bureau, or to the Visit California in July of 2022. Their media relations coordinator and PR manager reached out and asked for one of the Yurok canoes to be brought down to Palm Springs for an event that they were doing, Visit Native California. And Ashley Bowers made that happen and was able to get that canoe down there. Since then, they were contacted by Visit California's media relation coordinator to create an itinerary to host Davy Sutton and her film crew. And so they came up here and they met with the locals. They went through our local areas with regard to the Grove of the Titans. And there'll be some footage here of the Klamath River, the Smith River. And this segment here was featured on Local Now in November from the 25th to the 30th. It had 137,000 daily views in 230 cities. So it's currently on Go Play, and it's streaming on that. And then the topper on this is from this, Davy Sutton was interviewed on the NBC Today show on January 11th. And while she was talking about the top travel destinations in 2023, and this footage was playing as she was on the Today show talking about the various things that we have here locally. So I just wanted to highlight that because it is what we're doing. It's the work that the Visitor Bureau is doing, and it's what a lot of what you're paying for as the taxpayers when we do fund some of that. So I just am pretty proud of it and wanted to highlight that. I'll let it finish out playing, but I'm going to continue on. I took a tour of the CAL FIRE Dispatch Center. Fire departments in the district are interested in getting better dispatch services for their particular needs. And not that our dispatch services are not great, but a lot of times the fire departments need something slightly different than what it is that is being provided. So we went down and checked out the CAL FIRE Dispatch Center. I participated in a Reaching Rural team meeting. We had a local huddle here before we went with the federal help that we're going to be getting. We are going to have our first in-person meeting in February to continue those talks to see what program and what project we want to work on. I attended my final Solid Waste Management Authority meeting. I never really wanted to be on that committee to begin with, but since I was, I'm kind of sad that I'm leaving it. I learned a lot, and I feel it was very valuable information. I had several discussions regarding stolen mail, and so it's something that we really should be highlighting, and I'd like to coordinate something that would help light those community mailboxes a little bit better and work with the sheriff on to see if we can't get some security along that. Apparently with the stolen boxes, somebody created a master key and then it went through and they're able to collect all the mail throughout those community boxes. So anyway, it's on my radar. I'm looking to do something with that. I attended a homeless services ad hoc session, and I was just able to pop in briefly, and they're moving and shaking on that, and I'm certain that Supervisor Wilson and Supervisor Short will continue moving that forward. I participated in a Sutter Coast Hospital check-in. Once a year, I'd like to check in with Mitch Hanna and Ellie Popovich to see how we're doing, making sure that all of us are meeting each other's needs, and it was a good discussion. I hosted a DHH overview luncheon and meeting, and Supervisor Borges and I spent a couple hours getting an overview from the various program managers under the umbrella of DHHS. They do an enormous amount of work. I thought we could cover it in an hour. We were there 2.5 hours. We probably could have gone another 2.5 hours. Lots of good information coming out of that. I attended my final Behavioral Health Collaborative meeting. That's where we are looking to coordinate to get a mobile crisis unit. And so we're finalizing that, and the information will be coming to the board soon so that you can see the direction that is being suggested. I attended a First Five meeting. I was a little bit of a brag moment, I suppose, is I was appointed to the Middle Mile Advisory Committee by the Senate Rules Committee. And the Middle Mile Advisory Committee is really monitoring the progress in order for us to bring that 10,000 miles of broadband through the state of California. It's a billion-dollar project, and I get to sit on that committee with Assemblymember Wood and Mike McGuire and some of Caltrans, and so it's quite an honor for me to be on that committee. Attended the Chamber of Commerce annual dinner. I participated in an Area 1 agency meeting. I joined in on the LAFCO meeting yesterday, and I also attended the Redwood Coast Transit Authority joint meeting, and we were able to select a site for a transit hub. So that's pretty exciting, and that's something that's going to be coming out in the future. That's it.
Thank you, Supervisor Starkey. Supervisor Borges.
Yeah, so I really only have one thing I wanted to bring up that I felt I needed to talk about was last meeting there was a question asked about one of the grants from somebody in the audience. I thought it was a great question. It was about the mental health technicians that our grant was provided to our schools. And the question was, do they have the ability to evaluate our kids without parental permission? And I didn't feel like that got answered, and I didn't know the answer. So I actually went out and met with Jeff Harris from schools, found the answer, and actually tracked down that person and gave him the answer. And what I found was, no, they cannot. It is completely parent-based, parent-driven. It's just there as a tool to help kids with mental health. So if parents have issues, they now have more access to help. So I just wanted to get that out there. I thought that was a great question and wanted to answer it. And that was all I got.
Thank you, Supervisor Borges. Supervisor Wilson.
Yes, I had been busy. Had several meetings with department heads from the sheriff, chief probation, as well as discussions with the CAO and others as far as what we have. I took a tour with Alan Winogrove to go through and look at all the properties that Del Norte County has responsibility for and what maintenance we have requirements and what we voluntarily take on because of past histories of maintaining those properties. Looked at the condition of many of those locations that are in dire need of some TLC, but that takes dollars, as well as was distressed to see how many of the surplus vehicles are outlaying in all sorts of different locations amongst the county and have yet to be dealt with and disposed of in an appropriate fashion so that we are not wasting taxpayer dollars and that we're not allowing properties that we have fiduciary responsibility for to deteriorate to such an extent that the only value they have is to be junked. This is something that hopefully we have policy in place. It's just a matter of following that policy and doing what is appropriate. And so looking at some of the locations that hopefully we can direct some funding to that is available for us was quite informative, as well as looking at various locations that we may be able to have alternative usage for. To that, I'd also attended an acquisitions committee meeting where the look at is where we can do and what we can do to help reduce the homeless issues that we have in our community, as well as moving forward with locations of possible selection for sites for development of a location to house the homeless. And we are moving forward in that direction, hopefully in a very positive way, with the direction of trying to many different components to that. But it was very informative, but it was also I'm enthusiastic that they have the components in place to get something done, and not necessarily get done in 2 years, but something hopefully we can plan to do that it's going to have a positive effect community-wide in helping to control and provide better services to those that need it out in our communities. So we're looking at that, as well as had discussions with CAO Lopez on what we can do, because I know in the past we've had some strategic meetings with board members on long logistics planning for the community, and what we would have to do as far as steps to kind of look at reinvigorating that process for the board, because my outlook is that we have some very severe changes economically going forward. We have some things on the horizon that don't look particularly positive for our community economically, and to better get through those things, I think we need some valuable strategic planning. And amongst that is looking at what are already on the plates of every department in our organization, what they already have strategically planned, and what they have been directed to do already by the board, so that those things can be integrated into any long-term strategy that we'll have to move forward. I was very impressed by the staff. I've had meetings with Heidi, and we discussed issues that are going forward. I had discussions with John Olson about projects that we are needing some help, maybe some support from the board going forward, and so I want to give kudos to those that were there to help educate me, to help me move forward, and taking the time to meet with me, and there are many others that I'm going to be moving forward to have discussions with as we go forward, but I appreciate the time and the effort that they all took in helping me. I also attended the chamber dinner. It was a very nice event. Got to see a lot of familiar faces and talk to a lot of the folks that are retired, and enjoyed myself. So that's my time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. Supervisor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things I want to focus in on today. One of them, I represent the board on the North Coast Unified Air Quality Management District. I'm chair again this year, but one of the issues that has come to light is part of the rulemaking process of the Environmental Protection Agency. This is a federal government agency that regulates a lot of things, water in particular, but in this case, air. The sent out notice recently, which has caused a great deal of concern throughout the state of California, but in particular for rural counties, where the EPA would like to reduce our particulate matter in areas which is set around for this baseline, which is set about 12 microns, down to 9 to 10 microns. This might not particularly affect our air quality management district, which includes Trinity County, Humboldt, and Del Norte, but for the remainder of the state of California, it could have dramatic effects. Where it gets into issues with us is really at conflicting policies. And as many of you know, we have massive fuel loads in the state of California that are causing extreme wildfire throughout the state. And one of the pushes by the state of California is to do more prescribed burning to reduce those fuel loads. And so we are absolutely unclear how this particulate matter standard will actually affect how we do prescribed burning in the state of California and reduce these fuel loads. And in our air district that issues a lot of prescribed fire permits is truly concerned about this. So I'm working with folks from CSAC on this right now in our federal lobby, which is Paragon, to try to get a little bit more information as this rulemaking process goes forward. So that's the first thing I wanted to report on today. Having a lot of discussions around Camp Park and a donation that was made by the Westbrook family of Camp Park to the county. It's under whether or not that donation follows through is up to the California Coastal Commission, but we're working on potentially expanding that park and having a lot of conversations about having more opportunity for camping there on our coast when you first come across the border. Also attended a Crescent City Delaware County Oversight Board Committee. Also attended a Border Coast Regional Airport Authority meeting where we talked about runway expansion and the investment of dollars into that runway expansion. And in addition, had a great deal of discussion around one of our agenda topics today, so I won't spend much time on it, but it is around our new fire hazard mapping that's taking place throughout the state of California. Met with Chris McKay and Chris Ramey and Chief McKay about that at the fire hall here a week and a half ago, expressed the county's concerns, which will be the foundation of the letter that goes to the state this week. Hopefully our board will have some additional input potentially on that, but I thought staff Community Development Department did a great job at least drafting some of the issues that we have with this current fire hazard severity map. Dr. Fine Bridge is getting going. There's going to be a lot of traffic issues up on Dr. Fine Bridge until we get a alternate route around that, while for the next 4 years that bridge is being constructed. But as soon as that bridge that will be parked just to the upstream side of the current Dr. Fine Bridge that allows us the free flow of movement of traffic and doesn't bring everything to a standstill while that bridge is being constructed. But I'm glad to see that project finally getting started. And then the last issue is actually something that Supervisor Wilson just talked about, county properties that county maintains. So we've got one up in Hyuchi that was given to the community, but the county maintains, and it's become an issue with dogs. And not entirely sure how to address some of the issues with dogs on this particular piece of parcel that we maintain but don't own. But it's something I definitely need to rally the community about and see how they want to approach it. So that is the end of my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Howard. As for me, I attended the North Coast EMS MAC meeting, also attended the Baccara meeting, attended the RCRC Board of Directors meeting, which included a meeting of the Board of Golden State Connect Authority and Golden State Finance Authority while I was down in Sacramento. Also attended new board member orientation and the installation of the RCRC Executive Board. I attended the installation of Supervisor Starkey's being brought into the Middle Mile Advisory Committee. I appreciate getting to see that. I attended the 4-H soup supper this last weekend. It was a great event, a fun one. If anybody has not attended that in the past, I would highly recommend it, supporting our 4-H kids. I attended a couple of meetings of the Acquisition Committee, which is part of the Homeless Ad Hoc Group. I met with Vice Chair Starkey and Joe Rye from RCTA prior to our RCTA meeting and then the subsequent meeting of the RCTA and the Crescent City City Council to talk about our transit hub location. I attended the LAFCO meeting, and that is all of the meetings that I attended. While I have my time here, I would this time like to ask for consensus on a couple of items from the board. It's kind of ironic about Supervisor Wilson's comments about a strategic plan, because my request is kind of along those lines. I just wanted to acknowledge that the board tasks our different departments as items come to the board. And I believe we need to realize that there's really kind of no current mechanism to gauge how heavy of a burden that we put on the different department heads. So I think for edification of the board, coming to understand what amount of work and what size of the tasks are being assigned is an important piece of information that we should have. So I would like to have staff have a compiled list from each of the departments of their assigned tasks, sorted by both priority and the date that the Board of Supervisors assign that task, and how much time that it is costing that department head. I believe that if it was compiled into one county-wide full list, that we'd kind of get lost in the shuffle. So ideally, I'd like to see that it was sorted by or brought to us by each department head as part of their kind of stated the department that we get on a yearly basis. I'm hopeful that this will be a good illustration to the board about the things that are going on in the county, and I'm hopeful that it'll also be helpful to administration, the department heads, and as we conduct the business of the county. So with that, I would hope for some consensus from the board that we ask the department heads to compile that information for us, if that would be
So are
okay with
you
you.
looking for, just like at a meeting, for them to bring that forward and give like a 10-minute kind of presentation of what it is that they're working on, what they're doing, that sort of thing? Is that, I mean,
Yep.
I think this is a great idea, but I'm just kind of, I wanted to visualize a little bit what it is you're asking.
That was, those presentations kind of idea like you and Supervisor Maston had was going to be my next request, but that would hopefully be part of it, yes. I just kind of have this, for the last couple of years I've been on the board, it seems like we get a good idea, and say, hey, can we direct staff to do that? And we all look at each other and say, yeah, that's a great idea. Having no idea what's on their plate already. And I say no idea kind of flippantly, but yeah, I'm sure you're getting my drift that, we know some department heads that are here working on the weekends, and others, may not have that kind of load on their plate. But I think it would be good for the board to realize what kind of workload is on our departments and what their priorities are. And, just similar to what Supervisor Wilson said earlier. So I would hope that we would have consensus for that.
Yeah, I know for my discussions that we've had with some of the department heads, and agencies like the Sheriff's Office, HHS, you're talking about multiple agencies, multiple operations, and to come forward with, again, your top 5 priorities, the things that are not only been handed to you by the board, but also what projects and things that you are currently striving to accomplish and where your priorities are. Because my hope is that once we have that picture of where our overall is and where the priorities are, that strategically the board can sit down and make countywide long-term projections and strategies going forward that address the overall needs of our community and where our priorities need to be. Because as my fear is dollars get far fewer and we have to prioritize. We have to have a full picture before we can make that judgment.
Thank you. Supervisor Wilson. Borges, did you have anything?
So are you asking staff to provide like almost like a time log of every time somebody asks for something, what is involved in that? Or is this a whole new report you want them to generate to present? I guess we're already asking a lot. We're asking for more.
Chair, can I just ask for clarification? Because you said in your original statement that you want it to be a part of their state of the department that they do yearly, but that's held in closed session, a part of their evaluation. And I just want to make sure we're clear on what the direction's heading, because then Supervisor Starkey mentioned them doing it like as a presentation to the board, a 10-minute thing. So I just want clarification if it's both or.
I was going to ask that on my next item for consensus, I was going to ask that we do hear from those heads of departments and they could bring it at that time. So it's going to come. So it would not be a closed session item. It would be open.
Okay,
open to
I
the
was just,
public.
and that's fine. I was just clarifying because the state of the department is a closed session thing. It's not for the
Yeah,
public.
I
So that's why I
probably used
wanted
the
to clarify that.
wrong term there, but.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess what I'm asking is for an organizational tool. I'm pretty confident that the department heads probably have that priority list, have that list of tasks. I just would hope that we could see that in open session, that it would be more open and give us the ability to act with better education on how all the county departments are running. Mr. Howard, Supervisor Howard, sorry.
No worries, Mr. Chairman. I think what Supervisor Wilson's asking for and what you're asking for are different. Supervisor Wilson, I think, is, and rightly so, looking to do more of a forward-looking strategic planning type exercise with this board and department heads. I feel potentially what you're asking for is kind of getting down into some of the weeds to learn what department heads are doing potentially to current state mandated law, and then what additional assignments that this board has given them over time, and how far back to those assignments go. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Does it extend back to boards that aren't even on the radar screen anymore? So I'm not sure how useful that will be, other than us really trying to understand workloads, which I think is what you're trying to get at. But if that's the direction of the board, I guess that's fine. I really like Supervisor Wilson's idea, which is more of a forward-thinking, strategic planning type exercise, really trying to figure out what the board's priorities are for workloads for our staff, if it goes above and beyond what they're currently doing. So I guess we'd have to know what they're currently doing in order to do the next step. But this is a long discussion, and it could take several months.
I know it's a big ask. I do. And I agree that Supervisor Wilson's statements and mine are a little bit different, but I do agree that you need to know one to act on the other one. So I appreciate that consensus. The next part of this dovetails off of the meetings that Supervisor Starkey and Maston had last year, just prior to the adoption of the budget, wherein the department heads came and gave some presentations to them. I sat in on one of them, listened in on a few others, and it was very informative to me. It was kind of labor intensive for that. It was a short time frame. I don't wish for that kind of onus to be put on the department heads, but I would like to ask that our general fund department heads would participate in presentations similar to those in the first part of the year, as the calendar year, as we move toward our draft budget that we usually get in June. I think us having that better education about what their department needs are, their accolades, their shortfalls, you know, what they would do if they didn't have budget constraints, you know, those kind of questions, and getting into their budget and answering our questions for us prior to the budget coming to a vote at the end of summer. I just really felt strongly that I gained a lot of insight from those, and I appreciated the department heads doing that. As part of that, I'd like to thank the elected department heads for participating in those presentations. And if I can get consensus, I would respectfully request that they again decide to participate in these presentations to the board. I understand that they're not compelled to do so. So I wanted to make that very clear, that I'm very thankful that they did participate, and it was very informative. I realize Supervisor Wilson and Borges maybe didn't see those last year. Supervisor Starkey and Maston asked them to bring their budgets forward and talk to them just for a few minutes about what was going on in their departments, personnel challenges, all kinds of questions and answers were asked and answered. It was a very informative time, especially coming up to adoption of the budget. So I think it's really, like I say, informative, and it helps with transparency, which is much appreciated by myself and I'm sure the public. So with that, I would hope that the board would see the value in that and have consensus also to implement that kind of procedure.
So, as this board's aware, I had a disagreement with that direction last year. Both Supervisor Hemmingson and I took a pretty strong position against interfering with the department head process of bringing their budget priorities forward to us, where we then individually generally approach our department heads and query into a process. It was given to us that this is very much something the community wanted, and yet when the process finally occurred, there was only 2 or 3 people from the community that showed up to these meetings. We, and this is just my feeling on how a government process works, we as supervisors are elected to be representing our constituents in these processes. And our constituents, once we have this position, give us that faith to move forward in trying to allocate, in this case, let's say the general fund budget, because that's what's being proposed here, for us to dive into the weeds with our general fund departments, how best to allocate those funds. I put a lot of faith, and today a lot of folks here recognized that our department heads do an incredible job at putting together those budgets and bringing them to us. They know their budgets better than anybody else. I'm not entirely sure how that's the best use of our time, literally getting down into the weeds to figure out if we're going to change potentially those priorities. But then again, this might be part of what Supervisor Short has proposed here, which is, are we allocating, or are we having, as a board, allocating our department head times properly? And we know they have a lot of workload on their plates. This is a fact. But I'm not entirely sure with what limited budgets we have, how we're going to change that, especially in our general fund process. So it'll be interesting discussion, but I'm curious, as Supervisor Short said, what Supervisor Wilson and Supervisor Borges think of this. If they want to weigh in.
Supervisor Wilson, any comments?
My only comment is that, yeah, you know, any transparency is better than none, I mean, by far, but I find that for myself personally, I prefer to go directly to the department head because of the fact that getting to actually sit down and spend hours necessary and needed to understand their needs and operations and discuss the weeds, really, in many cases, because we are talking about, you know, limited budgets and where we're going to allocate our resources, and that direction ultimately comes from the board. But to do so effectively, you have to have that direct understanding. And that's really going to come from one-to-ones with the department heads. And that comes really, are you as a board member, is that where you feel your best allocation of time comes? And for me, at this point, it definitely does. But, you know, I can tell you from my experience as sheriff for 12 years elected, I was never addressed by any board member about the budget in 12 years. So, you know, it really is up to the individual board member where their forte is, where their interest is, and how much time they're going to dedicate towards what my understanding has come about budgets is, I don't care what it is you want to do, it's all about money. It's all about money. If you want to put a deputy out there, it's about dollars. If you want to get a car out there, it's about dollars. If you want to fix the boat ramp, it's dollars. If you want to address a community issue of homelessness, it comes down to dollars. So if you don't understand budgets, if you don't understand how government works and how we do things and where we can get our funds from, then you're not going to have that understanding in a public meeting, I'm afraid, although that's a good thing because it allows the public to address issues and allows department heads to respond directly with the public. So I'm not opposed to public meetings so that the public has the ability to actually talk with the sheriff or talk with the, you know, county maintenance or probation or whoever. However, you know, that's not going to be the kind of meetings that are going to be beneficial to me to get a better and detailed understanding about budgets. That's going to be the one-on-ones with the department meetings that I'll be having. But thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson.
So I
Supervisor
think I would have to agree with Supervisor Wilson. I'm all for transparency. I think it's great. As far as budget and everything goes, that's completely open to the public. Am I right? Like, you can see everything, every detail that's out there. And so I'm I like to ask a lot of questions, and so one-on-one for me is a much better situation. So even with a presentation or with a report, I'm still going to want to go sit in one-on-one and interact with the department heads myself and get those answers that I'm looking for. So I don't know if I'm fully on board with that.
So my only response to that is you're both talking about one-on-ones. I mean, that's 5 one-on-ones that the department had. So we're putting pressure on them regardless. And so, you know, this is just a combined thing. Number one, it involves all of us at the same time. It involves us being able to say, hear from the department head, I want this new system because it would streamline our processes in CDD. And it's all of us knowing on the same page and on the same time that that is something that we're striving for, we're reaching for. And it puts it on our radar. You know, while it was, so that was what was beneficial to me, is to be able to hear what is on your wish list, what more do you need. We can't give it to them all, we know that. But now we at least know, at least it was the first I've heard of it, that they want this system, and that we now as a board are aware of it together, and we move and we strive forward to get that for them. Because it's going to make their job easier, it's going to make the services that they provide to our community better. And so I think just a unified look at it. And at the end of the day, this is the Board of Supervisors budget. So when we approve it, it has to be approved with a full understanding of this board. And so that's why the meetings, it was streamlined. It was able to hear the information all at once, so we were be able to ask those questions right to that department head with regard to the budget. It was a short time period because we weren't listened to early on. And so we did kind of push for it, you know, and that was unfortunate. I do apologize to the department heads for having to do that. But it was nothing that hadn't previously been presented in the budget meetings. So I'm a believer in this. Most every other county does this. I think that it's something that is transparent, and I know that that's a touchy word because it's not that we currently aren't transparent, it just adds another layer of transparency that I am hoping that we can get with the public so they can see that we are actually spending that money in their best interests.
Thank you, Supervisor Starkey.
So to be clear, what you're asking for is a presentation of the department head's budget prior to our budget discussions. That's different than what I think I heard was being asked for here a few minutes ago by Supervisor Short. If we're talking about having the department head present, let's say, our upcoming fiscal year 2023-2024 budget in open public session like this, so everybody in the community could hear, that's I just want to be clear, that's what I hear you proposing, which is different what I think than Supervisor Short's proposing. Or is it the same?
Yeah,
Okay.
If what I said was different, then I made a mistake in the way I presented. That's just exactly what I'd like to see, rather than have it all compressed in a couple of days, spread it out the first part of the calendar year, just to kind of give the department heads the time to prepare that and bring the information to the board and to the public about what their needs are.
So how's that different than the public hearing processes that we currently have prior to our fiscal year budget being adopted? How is that process that you're proposing different than what mechanism we already have to have these discussions here?
Well, I'd like to just address that, because if you'll notice on the agenda is where they introduce the budget for the public hearing, there's an allotment of 10 minutes. And so it's never been really encouraged to spend several hours really diving deep into it. And so by doing this on a separate basis, then you're able to really, everybody knows they're going to be here for a while. We're going to dive deep into it. We're going to ask the tough questions, and it prepares them. So, and while it's there, it's available, but it's never been more than 10 minutes on the agenda for the discussion to occur.
Well, that's just a placeholder. The discussions oftentimes go longer than that. And if a board member, in this case, has a request, that department head steps up, and then those longer discussions take place right here in front of God and country. but I'm not entirely sure how that changes our current processes that are in place, other than having additional meetings that are separate from maybe what we're currently doing here, that dive a little deeper into the weeds. And diving a little deeper in the weeds, at least the three of us up here think that that would be more beneficial to us to have those one-on-one meetings with department heads. But again, I'm glad we're having this discussion because I had concerns about it last year, and I'm glad Supervisor Wilson and Supervisor Borges are weighing in on it now.
The discussions that were had last year with the department heads were 15 minutes about. Got all the questions that were asked of the department heads. Like I say, the information that was gleaned from that was valuable. And I don't think we dove into the weeds really. It was just an informative time to learn about the different department heads. And I was just hoping to do it in open session.
Chair Short, why couldn't we just do it during those public hearings? And at those public hearings, we've got 27 or so departments. We've got several of those linked to our general fund. Why wouldn't we just have, during those public hearing processes, if there are questions that are being generated or department heads that wanted to come and present their budget, why couldn't we just do it then? I mean, there's no timeline restricting us on a Tuesday from having exactly what you're talking about, a more transparent process for the public to consider.
No, I just wouldn't. I think once we get our draft budget, like in June, then our public hearings start until we adopt the budget late summer. I was just hoping to stretch that out to make it easier on the department heads for their presentation to us.
Yeah, but we have discussions about that draft budget long before June. At least I've had it before those draft budgets are presented to us.
Where do you have those discussions? is
Here,
what
on the dais. Do we not?
I know for myself, I would love to have the opportunity to have a formalized process and invitation to each of the department heads to bring forward their budgetary concerns prior to, of course, sitting down for the budget. I know, my opportunities, 12 years as sheriff was zero. I never once presented my budget concerns to the board. And having that opportunity to actually, sit before we end up going into budget discussions, would be tremendously beneficial, not only to me as a board member to hear, and have that presentation, but for the public to have that understanding. For the public to hear what these electeds as well as department heads are seeing in their projections going forward.
So I think that you're agreeing with us then. I mean, I think you're agreeing that this
Yeah,
is super beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, to have a presentation in public right here during the board members on an invitation basis to ahead of our budgetary discussions would be, interesting, not only to me, but I'm sure to the public in general, so, yes.
Well, thank you.
So just so I'm clear, because new guy here, so the public hearing that Supervisor Howard's talking about already does this, correct? Or am I wrong on that? Like, what's the timeline and how's it different than the timeline you want to do?
I don't see it that way. We like I say, we get presented our draft budget. It opens the public hearing until such time that we adopt the budget a few months later, late summer. As far as hearing from each department, we don't really have a mechanism to do that in the open right now, and that's what I'm asking for.
And during that hearing time frame, that's not done in here?
No, we are free to go to each department head and ask questions about the draft budget and get information that way.
So, big picture on this, right? We have a set amount of money we work with in the general fund. Our CAO and our folks in their various departments come to head and they battle it out each year. Our sheriff battles it out each year with our CAO, and a budget is eventually wrestled to that is balanced. If there are priorities, which is the money piece of what I hear Supervisor Wilson discussing here, then the first piece of Supervisor Short's concession, which we all had consensus with, is if there's extra dollars out there, how would we spend them? But there's a process, at least that this county goes through, that allows all this wrestling to take place over those limited dollars in our general fund. What's being proposed, so I'm clear, is that that wrestling take place here prior to our draft budget being put in place in June.
I'm sorry.
I think the word wrestling is really not necessarily the takeaway from this. It's more of the discussions, so that we can absolutely, and the public can see that we do have a limited amount of money, and that, you know, if CDD needs this program in order to streamline their services to the public, but we have to tell them no because we do have a limited amount of funds. I think that those are just, if that's information that the public should be aware of. So wrestling isn't necessarily the word I would use. I would think discussion, maybe a robust discussion, but.
Robust discussion. I could go for a robust discussion.
Yeah, my idea or presentations is that it's an information gathering for us as a board and as for the public. But that ultimately, what that does is it lets the board then decide its priorities as to what we want the CAO to have as a priority going forward in his,
Exactly.
in his discussions. So, you know.
Well, naturally,
Exactly,
this
that's-
comes forward with what we all had consensus with at the start of Supervisor Short's discussion, is that budget would naturally come forward with that priority setting. Because, like you said, those things that we ask for as board priorities have dollars attached to them. And so why wouldn't this piece of what we're talking about here not go along with what you're just discussing, which is having broad-based board discussions where we dive into the departments?
I think it would, and
Let's
that's
just combine it,
that's why, absolutely, like,
because there's no need to have a separate discussion when it comes to the draft budget process. Why don't we just combine it if we're going to go down this path right now, which we all approved by consensus?
I think that would be great. I don't want to overburden, you know, create an overburdening thing by doing this. My thought is just referring back to last year and the immense amount of information and edification that I got from those talks to the department heads. So I like your idea of
Well, it's going
having
to
it come together. And
It's going to
gonna
have
be-
to come up.
Yeah.
Because we're going to ask, how much is this going to cost if something's proposed, right?
So if that be the case, then we do have consensus
least
to
for
ask
me.
the department heads to do that then?
It's up to you guys.
Yes?
No.
The admin manual just says a majority to direct staff. Maybe we could just put this on the next agenda and staff can come back, look at some other county processes and present you guys some clear, concrete options, so it's a little more concrete, yeah.
That'd be very good. We can talk about it further, Mr. Lopez, if that's okay with you.
That would be great, because I'm thoroughly confused right now. The conversation that happened from a timeline perspective, from an approach perspective, from all different directions.
All right. Well, I apologize. That's my fault.
That's not
So we'll try and smooth that out.
It's all good. Public comment.
We are well past 10:25, so I'm going to go to our scheduled items and do our public comment period. Members of the public may address the board on matters which are within the jurisdiction of the board. If you are addressing the board regarding a matter listed on the agenda, you may be asked to hold your comments until the board takes up that matter. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Is there any public comment at this time?
I'm Donna Westfall, editor of the online publication CrescentCityTimes.com. Last year, I learned that the Crescent Fire District went out on over 2,000 calls, the majority not fire-related. This year, from reading Sam Straight's article titled No EOA for Del Norte Ambulance, What Was the Board BOS Thinking, published January 20th, I learned that only about a dozen structure fires took place in 2022, so most of those 2,000 call-outs were health-related emergencies. I'm asking that a copy of Sam's article be made a part of the public record because it would take me 9 minutes to read it, and I don't want to have my mic turned off and the sheriff's escorting me out of the building. I'll just relate some excerpts and paraphrase, and then if time allows, how this relates to taxes, both sales taxes and property tax. Sam writes, the story begins with the fact that we no longer live in times where candles, kerosene lamps, open flames, and fireplaces dominate most households and businesses. Coupled with improved building materials, building codes, and building inspections, fires no longer dominate the calls that most firehouses attend when the tonal sounds. Firehouses across the nation look for other means of making the investment in the local firehouse appear relevant. As such, rescues and health emergencies have become the dominant mechanism for the firehouse to remain important in their respective communities, particularly in the nation's volunteer fire departments in small rural communities. For the 3 or so decades that Del Norte Ambulance has been in service to this county, there has been a feud with the fire department. Each year, the county pays over $8,000 to North Coast Emergency Services, which advise the county to approve the EOA to Del Norte Ambulance. You pay for advice, and then you don't take it. The fact that the ad hoc reporting solely focused on anecdotal info provided by the local fire departments shows a skewed bias. No reporting was obtained by the local hospital, the school district, or the local public. Then Chairman Short is a volunteer firefighter, which I commend. What I don't commend is this. He doesn't believe he has a conflict of interest voting on this issue because he doesn't have a financial interest in the ambulance company. But correct me if I'm wrong. I believe he does get paid by the fire department, and as such would have a conflict of interest and should have reclused himself from the vote. I see I'm running out of time, so I'll have to leave the tax issues for another public comment. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Wow, so we just witnessed a non-agendized item discussion between you all and a consensus, which was an action taken in violation of the Brown Act. That's why your attorney said we're going to take it and put it on, oh, don't you talk yet. We're going to put it on an agenda. So anyway, with that said, on November 29th, I was robbed. My house, I had my car in my garage. The garage door was open, and my purse was out in the car, and the guy, between the hours of 4:30 and 6 p.m., came in, got my purse, my badge, my fob, all my credit cards, da-da-da-da. Shame on me. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because you wonder who's taken the mail. And I know who's taken the mail. Anyway, I reported all my credit cards except for I forgot to report the Home Depot card. And what happened was I got a phone call from 235 Temple Street that said, oh, there's boxes with your name on it and merchandise in those boxes, and it's the people that stole your purse. I'm like, okay. So around December 6th or so, I drove over there. Sure enough, there's boxes with my name on it and a 235 Temple Street address. So I called the police, waited for 40 minutes out in the rain and cold. Nobody showed up. No big deal. Went home, gave up, and the officer called me, I don't know, maybe an hour later or something. To make the So last night, I get a phone call from the owner of 235 Temple Street, who is evicting the people out of that place, because there's like 9 people. And it's my understanding that they steal things, and there's 3 properties, and everything's being placed over there somewhere. And when it comes to the mail, there's a hole being dug and the mail put in there that they're disposing of behind the residence. So that's what's going on with the mail, and I would think that that's a federal crime, so I don't know, maybe the feds will get involved because our cops won't. I can't even get a timely report generated to help these people evict the robbers. With that said, let's see, I got 20 seconds. So, yeah, I sure hope you do have budget workshops. It was very transparent. I know not people can come because they work, and it shows that what the county is lacking and what you guys don't know. So thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Hello, my name's Andy. I live on South Bank Road. I'm here again to see if there's any progress that's been made in the ad hoc committee that was agreed upon by the Board of Supervisors about dealing with vacation rental / hotels that are zoned in residential areas and using commercial business in that area, and that we're going to work on possible regulations, restrictions, and/or banning of them. I am very much looking forward to hearing something about that, and so are all my neighbors. So I'm reminding again, and I can bring in the train of neighbors again if I need to, but it's already been agreed for the ad hoc committee, so I think that we need to see what you guys have done, or we just sit here and talk and nothing gets done. So I appreciate it, and welcome Dean and Joey. Nice to see you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
I've been waiting with anticipation.
Okay, I'll try not to disappoint you. My name is Jamie Yarborough. I'm a veteran and live in the county of Del Norte. Long ago and far away, in a far-off land called San Francisco, I once took a Dale Carnegie course from the author of the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. The instructor in the elevator in the classroom, as we looked at me and said, "You know, they don't send ducks to Eagle School." Gave me a wink. I knew I was in the right place at the right time. I'm about to deliver a speech given by someone by the name of V, taken from the movie V for Vendetta in 2005. Highly recommended, with literary license in the substitution of Joe Biden for Barack Obama when I first copied it from the script in 2008. Enjoy. Good evening, America. Allow me first to apologize for this interruption. I do, like many of you, appreciate the comforts of the everyday routine, the security of the familiar, the tranquility of repetition. I enjoy them as much as anyone. But in the spirit of commemoration, whereby the important events of the past associated with somebody's death or at the end of some bloody struggles is celebrated by a nice holiday, I thought we could mark the second Tuesday of November, a day that is sadly no longer remembered, by taking some time out of our daily lives to sit down and have a little chat. There are, of course, those who do not want us to speak. I suspect now even orders are being shouted into telephones, and men with guns will soon be on their way. Why? Because while the truncheon may be used in lieu of conversation, words will always retain their power. Words offer the means to meaning, and for those who will listen, the enunciation of truth. And with the truth is, there's something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there? Cruelty and injustice, intolerance, oppression, and once you had the freedom to object, think, and speak as you saw fit, now you have censors and systems of surveillance, coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission. How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, the truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty party, you need only look into the mirror. I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There is a myriad of problems which conspired to corrupt your reason and rob you of your common sense. Fear got the best of you, and in your panic you turned to now President Joe Biden. He promised you order, he promised you peace, and all he demanded in return was your silent, obedient consent. Each night I seek to end that silence, remind this country what it has forgotten. More than 200 years ago, a great citizen wished to embed the second Tuesday in November forever in our memory.
Your time has expired. Could you wrap it up, please?
I will. His hope was to remind us that fairness, justice, and freedom are more than words. They are perspectives. If you have seen nothing, the crimes of this government retain unknown to you, I would suggest you allow the second Tuesday in November to pass unmarked. If you see what I see and feel as I feel and seek as I seek, then I ask you to stand beside me in November of 2024 outside the gates of the voting booth, and together we shall give them a second Tuesday to remember and never be forgotten.
Mr. Yarborough, your time's expired.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Good morning.
Good morning. Dave Powell, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys. I'm here on behalf of vacation rental owners in the community, and I don't have a lot to say except for these are not hotels, these are homes. They're a real benefit to our community, and I feel that I just need to say something since there's always a point being brought up about it. They are important for our community, and they give people an opportunity to come and to stay with their families and to really enjoy our area. So I am in favor of vacation rentals. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, I'll close the public comment period, and we will move on to item 16 on our agenda, our 10:40 timed item. I will open the public hearing for the draft Del Norte County 2022-2030 housing element and request public comments. And 2, we will continue the public hearing for the draft Del Norte County housing element to the February 28th regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors for adoption, as requested by our Director of our Community Development Department. Good morning, Heidi.
Good morning, board members. Thank you for having us this morning. It's been a long road to get to today. We have our consultant from Interior Harnish, Ryan Lester, who has a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation to give to you in the audience this morning. So if you're ready for that,
Very good.
I'll have him come up.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for having me today. I believe we have a PowerPoint queued up here. Okay, and I can control that here. Oh. Yes, sorry, I was just figuring out how to control it. My apologies. Thank you for having me today. My name is Ryan Lester. I'm a project manager with Mintier Harnish. We are a planning consulting firm out of Sacramento, and we are leading the update process for the housing element update. So quickly, what I'm going to talk about today, we'll talk about some housing element basics. We'll talk about the regional housing needs allocation, otherwise known as the RHNA. We will go through some of the updates for the 6th cycle. That's the current housing element update. And then finally, we'll end by talking about the project schedule, our community engagement efforts, and then next steps in the process. So housing element basics. What is a housing element? Well, it is one of the elements of the general plan, but it's the only element that's required to be updated on a prescribed schedule and to be certified and reviewed by the state. So the housing element is a little different. It's plans for 8-year planning periods, so we're planning through 2030 currently. So what does a housing element do? Well, it works to provide an assessment of both current and future housing needs, again, through 2030. It identifies opportunities as well as constraints or barriers to housing production. And then it establishes goals, policies, and programs to work to overcome those constraints to meet the housing needs of the community. And finally, and this is big in the current update, it updates county policies, programs to reflect new state laws. So One of the reasons it's required to be updated every 8 years is because there's always new state laws that jurisdictions need to update their code related to. So that's one of the big things we do in the policy document. We have a program for all the code updates that need to happen, and we list them all there. Like I said, there's a lot of new legislation between these updates. I'm not going to go through each of these. The point is there's just a lot. There were a number of bills in 2017, 2019, and then 2020 that we have to address in the housing element. We have to evaluate whether or not the county complies, and then make plans to ensure that compliance in the future. Again, just more. There was a lot. There's a lot in this round. So some of the objectives of a housing element. So conserving and improving existing affordable housing. It's generally cheaper to keep what you have than to start new, as well as maximizing housing opportunities throughout the community. That's a big emphasis in this update. The state wants to see that multifamily isn't just being planned in certain areas, that it's being planned throughout a community with some kind of equity lens on it. Removing governmental or other constraints to housing investment. This would be like if in our evaluation we have to evaluate permitting times, how long it takes, fees, things like that. And if we find any constraints there, we have to report them. And then finally, promoting fair and equal housing opportunities throughout the community. So these are some of the sections of the housing element. So I'll just go through these very quickly. The needs assessment is kind of like a background report. It talks about the existing conditions as well as the existing needs in the community. The housing sites inventory, this is where we actually identify land zoned and available for residential development. Constraints on housing, this is where we look at those non-governmental and governmental constraints. And then the affirmatively furthering fair housing section, this is brand new. This is new in this cycle due to AB 686. We have to provide this fairly massive fair housing analysis now as part of the housing element. It's both regional and local, so you have to look at compared to the neighboring counties as well as compared to the city of Crescent City. And we use data provided by the state as well as maps provided by the state to identify some of those issues and then try to put in place some actions to start to work on those issues. And that's a new requirement of the state. And then finally, the policy document. And this is the piece of the document that sets the goals, policies, and programs for the county's action plan. So next I'm going to talk about the regional housing needs allocation. This is a little bit in the weeds, and I apologize, but it's very important. What this is, it's the quantified housing goal that each jurisdiction has to reach through zoning. We have to zone for enough land to meet these goals that are set by the state. It's called the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, also known as the RHNA. You'll hear that a lot. So how this works is every 8 years the state passes down a regional determination. They give, for the whole region, a series of housing goals, and then the regional councils of government, or in this case, since there isn't one for Del Norte County, HCD actually does this. They make a methodology to split those units up between all the jurisdictions in that region. That methodology process is a public process. Jurisdictions are allowed to appeal, but it happens well before the housing element, so that's up currently. So each jurisdiction gets their allotment. They plan for that in the housing element through zoning, by zoning enough land to meet those needs. And then each year they report back to the state the number of permits that are being approved. The state then crunches all those numbers and spits out a determination for the region for the next round. So you can see it's a cycle, right? So we're currently planning for December 31st, 2022 through September 15th, 2030. So this is what the RHNA looks like. You can see here that there are housing goals in the very low, low, moderate, and above moderate income categories, and that the total capacity the county needs to plan for is 386 units. About 40% of those units are for very low and low income housing units. And how we plan for these is identifying available residential land that allows 15 dwelling units an acre. The state says for Del Norte County, if you hit 15 dwelling units an acre and you allow for that, then that's acceptable as capacity for lower income housing. So it's really, it's doing a density analysis. I have two tables here just to compare the 5th to the 6th cycle. We're in the 6th cycle currently. And you can see at the top table that in the 6th cycle, our total RENA is 386. In the last round, it was only 233. I wanted to point this out because every jurisdiction in California is dealing with this in this round. We have some clients that have had 300-400% increases in their RENA. It's just the state pushing for more housing, and every jurisdiction is responsible. So it's not particular to Del Norte County. And then the lower table, I just wanted to show that even though the numbers have increased, the distribution of those units is approximately the same. The state still wants to see an emphasis on lower income housing. So I'll talk quickly about some updates for the 6th cycle, some of the things that changed in this housing element. So the housing element uses a range of approaches, including reducing constraints, obviously, providing that residential capacity to meet the RENA. This is not something that every jurisdiction can do. Sometimes they have to actually put a program in that says, we have a shortfall of sites, we cannot provide them, we need to go and do a whole rezone program. And that usually has to be done in the first year after the housing element is adopted. The county we were able to work with staff and identify enough residential land to meet the RENA, so we don't need to do that. Providing additional support to housing programs. So in the 6th cycle, HCD doesn't want to see you just keep everything from the 5th and keep it as is, especially if you didn't have the production numbers to meet that the RENA in the 5th cycle. So they want to see programs beefed up. And then finally, again, update regulations to meet state requirements. So the housing needs chapter was updated to reflect new data and conditions from 2014 to 2020. The constraints section was updated based on new state requirements. We had to analyze a few new things. And then changes to the zoning code since 2014, as well as feedback from stakeholders in the community. The sites inventory was updated based on building activity, but many of those 5th cycle sites continue to be used. We didn't completely start from scratch. That's very hard in Del Norte County, where there's just not that much residential land available. So we continued a lot of those 5th cycle sites. Although 2 commercial sites were initially added, these are site 11 and 13. We believe that they're very feasible for multifamily development. And then to respond to HCD comments, we removed 2 sites because the constraints in the coastal zone. Those sites can still be developed. We're just not assuming that they're going to be developed as low-income housing. It's really hard in the coastal zone, as you know, just with the permitting process. And then 3 commercial sites were added to the inventory, and these are 22, 23, and 24, because we needed to have additional land after the loss of those 2 coastal zone sites. And then I have a bullet point here that I wanted to stress, and that's that lower income sites identified in previous housing elements, they have to allow, in order to use them again and still consider them feasible, you have to allow residential uses by right. So that's something that we're going to have the county allow in the code. And that would just be for sites that have 20% affordable, to allow that by right, so without discretionary review, basically, streamlined review. So affirmatively furthering fair housing, or AFFH, this is a whole new chapter. It's quite long, and it has a lot of maps and a lot of analysis. And then one of the key aspects of the AFFH section is right at the end, we have to have a table that says, okay, here's a summary of the issues we identified. Here are some contributing factors to those issues, and then here are some meaningful actions we're proposing. So there is a table in that section that does that, and then those actions that we propose get taken over into the goals, policies, and programs, where we've really updated those to respond to changing housing needs since 2014, new state laws, and then those AFFH, that AFFH analysis. So again, while the updates include several new implementation actions, we're aware that the county has budget constraints, staff time constraints, so we're not trying to break the mold completely. We are trying to keep up with the state. I would love to be able to say that we're on the cutting edge and we're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but jurisdictions just can't do that. The state is asking so much, it's hard for any jurisdiction to do that currently. A few changes in the policy document. So the policy document was revised to respond to some of the comments from the state. So many programs were revised to provide greater specificity. The state doesn't want to see like general programs. They want to know exactly what you're going to do, what's the objective, and what's the timeline. When are you going to do it? So if you've read any of the past housing elements, you'll see a difference in this one. We've added a ton of stuff in the programs to give it more specificity. And then as far as changes to programs, so Program A, the sites inventory, this talks about the requirements of the state related to the sites inventory. Program EE, this is a program promoting fair housing and affirmatively furthering fair housing. It's actually required that we have a program in the housing element, and then it's also required that we take that fair housing lens and we try to apply it to other programs as appropriate. So we've tried to do that and add things to existing programs that can help overcome those fair housing issues. And that's really the extent of the changes in the policy document. We really didn't try to take it too far. HCD still pushed us a little bit, and so we did add some more specificity. We added a few extra actions where they said, hey, you know, your analysis identified a constraint here. You know, you need an action to deal with that. So that's the approach we've taken with it. I want to go over quickly our project schedule. So this project is actually bigger than just the housing element. It starts with the housing element, but actually the project goes into actually implementing the housing element. So we're currently in the housing element update in phase 2, but quickly, and actually we've already started, phase 3 and 4 will be implementing. So phase 3 is actually taking some of the programs and immediately working with staff to implement those. That may be the code updates, that may be something related to emergency shelters. There's a new law related to emergency shelters and how we're going to permit emergency shelters, et cetera. And so we'll work with staff to immediately start to do that. In phase 4, we'll actually set up, we'll draft objective design standards, and these would allow streamlined review of projects without design review or any discretionary processes, because all of that would be coded into an objective language that if they hit all these marks, then they've completed what the county is asking for. So this is a new practice, and a lot of cities and counties are just putting this right into their code. So rather than have just the route of having design review, they also have a streamlined route. They have objective standards, exactly what they want to see, and they're not quite, you know, they're not wishy-washy at all, and they go right in the code. And if you hit those, you can get your permit, or if you don't want to hit those, you can go through the standard route and do the design review, et cetera. It doesn't preclude the county from having a discretionary process. It just allows the option for the developer to choose a streamlined route if they want to meet all your standards. So that will be in phase 4. Phase 5 will be the environmental documentation, and then finally phase 6, amendments to ordinance. So we'll actually look for adoption. I want to go through quickly our community engagement efforts on the project. So we held stakeholder interviews to talk with local developers, fair housing folks, housing advocates. We did 2 community workshops, and then we've had study sessions with the Planning Commission and Board, as well as we will have an additional hearing after today. We put out 2 newsletters. We have a project website that's like the central hub for all of our information. We've used social media and e-blast to get information out. Again, we did stakeholder interviews. We held virtual events, and these are good for housing elements, especially early on in the process. Having a workshop on Zoom, and you can put that workshop up on Zoom, and no matter when somebody gets involved in your project, they can watch that and they can get that educational piece, is really helpful. So we put that up. We allow people to comment on the plan at any time on the website. There's a button on the side. They just hit the comment button, and they can immediately send us their comments. And then again, study sessions and hearings. So we're trying really hard to not just meet HCD's requirements for community engagement, but to go above and beyond to really connect with the community and do what we can. I know that a lot of the updates are being driven by state law, but that's not everything, right? I just have a preview of one of our newsletters. Again, the first one was really an educational tool. We put it out there so people could read it. They could always read what really is a housing element, and they could know the important information. I mentioned the comments button. It's here on the right-hand side. There's a green button. Anybody can hit that and send us comments. There's an orange button. They can hit that and send us their email address and be added to the email list. We also have an accessibility widget down here in the corner. And if somebody clicks this, it opens this menu. They can make the text larger or whatever they need for accessibility for the site. And so we've really tried to make ourselves as well as the website and the information accessible. Quickly, some next steps in the process. So we're looking to take comments and directions from the board. We actually have a draft that's currently being reviewed by HCD. This is a second review. We're hoping for a clean review, but what we found in the 6th cycle is that HCD, they're allowed 2 review periods. But if they have more comments at the end of the 2nd review period, you're going to have to go for a 3rd. And those final review periods are 60 days at a time. So rather than go through multiple rounds of review like that, and each time having to set up an adoption hearing, which adds 6 weeks to the schedule, you've got to get the information out and do all that. What we've done is we've submitted to HCD for their expedited review. And they're going to give us feedback. We'll be able to make those edits and bring them to you. What we didn't want to do is come to you, adopt, and then have HCD say, yeah, we have all these other comments. You need to make these changes. And then we make the changes, and then have to bring them back to you again, re-adopt. So there is a funding concern. We need to have a compliant housing element for one funding matter. So we've asked HCD to work with us and do expedited review. They're going to do it as quickly as they possibly can. So that's where we're at. So following their review, we'll make any final revisions and resubmit to you for adoption. And again, we're working with HCD to try to achieve that compliance by February 13th. It will be tricky. They have to give us at least a week's heads up. If they do have any comments, we have like a day to make them. Then we have to post them to the website and to the public for 7 days, and then get them back to HCD to re-review by the 13th of February. It's a time crunch, but they're working with us, and we're hoping that it'll work. And that's it. So I'll be here to answer any questions you have. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Is there any comments, questions from board members? Okay, we'll open up. Oh, I'm sorry, Dan.
Just want to make a comment quickly. Appreciate our staff, appreciate the presentation that you made. It was great. I hate the fact that we have to do this. This is painful. This is bureaucracies in Sacramento dictating to us what they think our county needs and what they think our county has and should be looking like and how we should develop our own counties. And they're taking the power out of the hands of the board, and they're placing it into themselves, and they're making this not only expensive but onerous. They drive away development. They do not encourage development. And this process, as painful as it is, I'm going to vote for it. Because without it, we cannot go for additional funds that are necessary. You know, you feel like you're thanking someone for beating you. And I'm sorry that it's that process. I wish they would leave us alone and allow us to do what we need to do in our communities and develop it appropriately as we see fit to meet the needs of our community and not being driven by someone who is outside of our community that doesn't have an understanding of where we are and what we need. So, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. I'm going to open up this item for public comment at this time. Is there any public comment?
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. Interesting topic here today with the Housing Authority and the talk of a strategic plan. Great idea to have a good plan. I'm a little disappointed in the previous comments, sir, about voting one way and feeling another way. This seems to be a perfect example of government imposing itself on more government. The housing climate is reflective of the employment climate, not the other way around. We can afford what the jobs are. We have California telling us more what we have to do, right? Sacramento. And then we have to hire, is it a nonprofit or a for-profit? Those lines are another conversation. But so we're hiring someone from Sacramento to tell us what's best for our community. We hire a lot of people to work for our community. We have a lot of underpaid people that we could give this money to come up with this plan. And a strategic plan? Yes, most definitely. Let's keep some money here in our community. We don't want these low income or very low income, moderate. I mean, is very low income, is that no income or is that, I mean, let's be honest with what they are. The presentation talked about opportunities and constraints. I'd say our biggest constraint is probably the state and their mandates right now. Were they going to take more of our land? I mean, we're all 80% government workers. Regional housing needs allocation. Why? We're a strong community. We know what's best. Don't we know what's best for us? We have to have him come up and tell us. If we don't address jobs as part of the housing, it's unsustainable. Vote for your constituents.
Second. I just want to thank you. But the one thing that we do need that low income, the problem is without the dollars that come with this, with the approval of this, the development and putting in developers to actually do something and to make it affordable so that they can actually build something that is low rent is not going to be possible. And that's why we need that funding.
My questions are, who's footing the bill to build these units? Are these low-income houses tax exempt? Because, you know, we got to pay fire tax on that, the ones who have houses. But if they're tax exempt, they don't have to. What is the definition of low-income housing? 250,000, 300,000, 150,000? What are we selling them for? And yeah, how dare the state walk in here and mandate what our county has to do? That's communist. And Mr. Governor Newsom, you got to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Good morning.
Good morning. My name's Amber Weir. I'm Project Director for NorCal for Health. It's a project of the California Health Collaborative. And I'm here, I just wanted to actually say thank you for all the work that you put into this document. And I have just a little bit more information that I wanted to share with everybody on the secondhand smoke issues in multi-unit housing. And when we talk about health issues and people that are in these units and exposed to secondhand smoke. So I have some statistics. I thought I could pass that around to everybody. And then I also just wanted to, I mean, You guys did address, and thank you for addressing health in housing and equity in that. Under Goal G, you have safe and healthy housing. And I just wanted to suggest maybe a little more clarification on policy G2, which currently says the county shall encourage new housing developments to be smoke-free. I'd like a little more clarity on that encourage part. It would be nice if the county shall establish local policies for smoke-free multi-unit housing. This not only helps with equity for the children and the seniors that are living in smoke-free or in possibly secondhand smoke situations 24/7, but it also addresses the disparities in, or it addresses preserving the supply of your housing as well, because it's easier to keep housing than make new housing. So just wanted to offer a little bit more food for thought and a little more clarity for healthy housing options. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Hello again. I'm still Dave Powell, and thank you for the opportunity to chat with you. I agree. This is a classic example of us being attached to Southern California and being the tail that is being wagged by the dog. And I mean, to me, it borders on extortion, what they're doing. But that's where we are. And Mr. Lester, I appreciate all the hard work. I had questions to ask, and he responded to a lot of those already. I think that zoning is going to be a big question. But that has to happen, my understanding, after the element has been approved. So that will be a big challenge. I have to admit, I've only read a small portion of the 292 pages that the document contains. I can imagine our congressman being expected to read a 4,000-page omnibus law overnight. It was daunting for me, even what I did do. But I do think that this is going to be a good opportunity for our community to deal with some of the zoning things. I think that will be important. The document talked about constraints, and I think one of the main constraints is the construction process and the things that contractors are expected to do, solar panels, wrapping a house with metal for earthquake-proof seismic activity, things that are not really highly applicable around here, but they run the cost of housing extremely high. I think I'm wondering if there is an opportunity that one of the maps had the lots behind or to the west of Mary Peacock as part of the possible inventory. Those are all platted. There is legal access to each of those lots, but there is not a road. There is not really access, let alone infrastructure out there, utilities, et cetera. I'm wondering if there is any way that the county can assist in that process of making those roads available and putting utilities in there. I know there's probably something that I don't understand about all that, but to put that all on the developer is difficult because there's a lot of work to be done in there. And those lots, I'm a realtor and we've tried to sell those lots before, but you can't even get to them. They are great places, especially with their proximity to Mary Peacock. So I think that's good. Again, and if there's anything that we can do, the Board of Realtors, to be a part of this to help, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item? Okay, we'll close the public comment period and bring it back to the board. Supervisor Howard.
Thank you. And I don't know if this question's best served for Ms. Kunstler or Mr. Lester. Couple questions specific to this development piece, because it really, when it comes to providing for what is about 46% or 177 units over the next 8 years of low and very low income housing, we as a county essentially have to attract development, is my understanding, in order for us to meet or achieve that goal. And so I want to understand in your eyes, and I think you tried to address some of this in the report, but I want to hear it here for the public that hasn't read our almost 300-page report. What are the barriers in your eyes to do that piece of our housing element for us to achieve our goals? And Ms. Kunstl, Mr. Lester, I don't know who wants to address this.
So part of the thing here is that the housing element and meeting the RHNA in the housing element is not about production, it's about zoning. So the first step of the process is to zone enough land to meet the RHNA, and then to, in the housing element, provide incentives to make development there more feasible, to make it more feasible for lower income housing, so incentives that help save money, help save time, things of that nature. So that's the task of the housing element. Beyond that, each year the county will have to report the number of permits they're permitting against the RHNA, but there's no obligation to actually meet that RHNA. What HCD may say is, you're not keeping up, you need to add more incentives, right? Because the county doesn't develop property, right? You're not building housing units. Jurisdictions don't do that anymore with the end of redevelopment. So that is not your goal, to build those units and to ensure those production. It's just about incentivizing those. So have we done enough? Have we gone far enough with our incentives to make those more feasible and to help bring it into a reality? But the county is not obligated to produce anything or to ensure that those numbers meet. Now, if you incentivize things well enough and your lower income housing does meet the RHNA, the actual production meets the RHNA, then you actually get some breaks from some state laws. Like SB 35 right now is huge. Every jurisdiction has to have a streamlined review process for affordable housing. Well, if you hit your RHNA and you're already meeting your lower income, you don't have to put that in place. There's only like 16 or 30 jurisdictions that have actually met that and don't have to do that. But that's the only like advantage, other than getting the housing built, that's the only advantage to actually meeting the production of the RHNA. The real emphasis is on what are you doing to plan for that.
Thank you for that. So let's, before you leave.
Oh, okay, sure, sorry.
Let's go over some of those incentives. We hear from our community all the time, we've got a massive homeless population, right? And obviously one of these categories that we're supposed to be incentivizing development is for this very low income bracket, right? So peel that banana back. What are the incentives specifically that HCD would be looking for this county to provide to developers for that to occur?
Sure. So a streamlined review process is one of the biggest things that they want to see. How are you getting out of the way of the application process? When it comes to emergency shelters, where are they allowed by right without any discretion? And is there enough capacity in those zones to meet that need, right? So we provided a little capacity analysis in the housing element talking about emergency shelters where they're allowed. And actually we found that the conditional use permit process for those emergency shelters is a constraint. So it's not an incentive, but one of the things we have to do is work to remove that constraint. We have to identify and work with the county to identify zones with capacity to meet the most recent point in time count, which I believe was 400 plus, in those zones by right. So that is actually a current constraint, and that's one of the constraints that the county is going to have to work to undo. You have to say, you know, we're going to allow it in this zone and in this zone with no discretionary. If they meet all the zoning requirements and all the zoning standards, then they get their permit. That is one of the big incentives for emergency shelters. One of the other things that jurisdictions do is they commit to working with the nonprofits that are out there, right? And HCD wants to see this. They want to see, how often are you calling the nonprofits and coordinating with them? What are you doing to plan regionally with them? How can you do that? So it's both about development incentives and engagement and outreach, if that helps.
It does. Thank you, Mr. Lester.
Thank you, Supervisor Howard. Any other comments from the board? No other comments, okay. So this public hearing will remain open until our February 28th meeting, correct? Alrighty, we will move on down our agenda to our regular items. Item number 17, approve and adopt a resolution of the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors appointing members of the Del Norte County Law Library Board of Trustees for the 2023 year as requested by County Council.
So this is actually a meeting late because I was trying to find people to serve. We've got some new people coming in. I am stepping off. If I didn't, we'd have 3 members of my office on there, and we don't even use the law library. These are people that are willing and committed, and the law library has a little more money than they have in the past because they've cut costs and savings. So I'm hoping that they can put together a little vision and do something fun.
Very good.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
I will second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on this item? Hello?
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. But I just wanted to let you know, today I was in the law library, and there's a big hole up in the right-hand corner. I don't think nobody's ever noticed it, but, I mean, the roof is falling in, just so you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item? Okay, I close public comment and bring it back to the board. Kylie, would you pull the vote?
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, item 18, receive an update from the Tobacco-Free Del Norte Coalition on the risks of secondhand smoke and the benefits of a smoke-free multi-unit housing policy. Already got a primer on this one. Welcome.
Good afternoon. So I believe we have a PowerPoint to share as we speak. My name's Denise Doyle-Schnacker. I'm a member of Tobacco-Free Del Norte since almost its inception. We'll need to nail that date down one day. And
good morning, members of the board. I am Crystal Yang. I'm the Health Education Coordinator for the Tobacco Use Prevention Program over at Public Health.
Welcome.
so I'm going to start with some facts, which some of us love, some of us not so much, and we want to get to the emotion too, which Crystal's going to cover. So you're looking at the recent grades for Del Norte County from the American Lung Association State of Tobacco Control Report. This report evaluates states and federal government on the proven effective tobacco control laws and policies that protect and save lives. Each component on this report has been shown to improve the health and wellness of communities. So there's data behind that. There are 5 key categories: smoke-free outdoor air, reducing the sales of tobacco products, restrictions on flavored tobacco products, and emerging issues, of course, as they come up. The 2 columns on the right show us the American Lung Association score for both Crescent City and Del Norte County, unincorporated. If we look at the smoke-free housing section, you can see that the score for Crescent City is an A. Woohoo! In fact, in a recent policy brief from the American Non-Smoker Rights Foundation, Crescent City's multi-use housing ordinance is listed among the top 42 strongest smoke-free multi-use housing laws in the state, and the strongest one for a rural county. So this ordinance is leading the way in protecting vulnerable populations from the risks of secondhand smoke, third-hand smoke, and the harms of tobacco use in general. Currently, the Del Norte County unincorporated jurisdiction does not have a smoke-free housing law in place that would protect those vulnerable populations. Children, which I think the whole board is, and new folks might not know, that's where my heart is. But also the elderly and those living with pre-existing health conditions, things that can't be changed, right, in their lives. So You can read the slide. Did you know all of these facts? But let me point out some things. So families living in multi-use housing, like apartment buildings, duplexes, and condominiums, are often exposed to secondhand smoke from neighboring units. They may choose to have a smoke-free home, but they have to live with their neighbors' choices too. Smoke travels through doorways, shared vents, stairways, cracks in walls, windows, exposing non-smokers to their neighbors' secondhand smoke. Some of our local voices we like to lift up. Ms. Storr shares, and some of you may have seen these or heard these folks speak, but just lifting up that in the first one, Ms. Storr shares she was a multi-use housing resident at one time, and she understands, she was a smoker herself and understood, yeah, I didn't smoke around kids, you go outside, right? And then Briscoe, who is a current multi-use housing resident, giving them headaches, you know, all of the effects of secondhand smoke and what that can do to you. Coming through the air system that they have no control of because of where they live, other than having to find a place to move to, which we understand we have an issue with in Del Norte County, right?
And to give you an idea as to how indoor smoking can impact owners and landlords of multi-unit housing complexes, I'm going to share this public comment by Jim Sanders, he is the manager of Seawood Village, which is the biggest apartment complex in Del Norte County. Just a few minutes. This mouse is kind of funny.
Jim Sanders? Hello. Mr. Mayor. Good evening. Members, appreciate your time listening today. I am the manager of Seawood Village Apartments, and I know I've spoken with you guys before in the council, but this is absolutely 100% tricky. There is so many ins and outs to this. I can only give you my perspective, so that's what I plan on doing today. So the two key points to this, at least as far as I'm concerned as a property manager. First thing has to be done. So my experience, I've been here almost 10 years now. We just had a person pass away, and before we went smoke-free, about 3 years ago. He smoked in there from 2004 until right around 2016, 2017. He removed all of his family, removed all his stuff. And we have been doing upgrades to his apartment over this time, appliances, that kind of stuff. It's not a pretty sight. And the reason I say that is the white paint that we used was a cocoa brown. We can't just paint over that. If we paint over that, we're gonna share that health risk to the next people coming. So can't do that. I'll go back to cocoa health and economy. The 40-year-old refrigerator that I gave him, we have to throw away. There is no cleaning that. Every outlet, the air duct system, flowing down to the concrete, possible sheetrock removal, which is geometric sheetrock removal, all this has to be done. Now I feel bad for the person living next to him, who's been there for 5, 6 years, and his bless heart, not to say a word, has not complained, but I know that the smoke, you can tell about it, it's not on the way through the next one. We
All right, so from Jim's comment, it's clear that smoking indoors can be costly, extensive, and can affect those who are neighboring them. This data here is from a recent survey that my staff and I conducted in October. We went across the county and surveyed over 120 people, asking them their opinions on various tobacco topics. One in particular was whether they believed they have a right to live in a smoke-free home, and over 90% of these respondents responded yes to that. So all this information that we're sharing with you today is to show the importance of addressing the harms of secondhand smoke, especially when there are people in our community who are affected by it. A smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance would protect families, children, and vulnerable populations from the harms caused by this drifting secondhand smoke. And the Tobacco-Free Del Norte Coalition has accessible information and resources on their website at tobaccofreedelnorte.org. And there's also my staff and I at TUP. We can provide outreach, education, cessation resources. We have free no smoking signage that we can distribute. We have sample lease agreements, sample addendums that we're more than happy to share with others. And we can assist with handling any complaints from tenants or landlords by prioritizing education first. That is all for our presentation today. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I hope that together we can create a healthier community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We have any public comment on this presentation? Good morning.
Good morning. My name's Amira Long. I actually typed that out just in case I forgot. I'm the executive director of First 5 Del Norte, and now that we're well educated on the facts and the science behind the dangers of secondhand smoke, I wanted to briefly share my personal testimonial. I'm lucky enough to be able to say that my folks are really good people. They always provided a loving, warm, supportive environment to which myself and my 3 older brothers could grow. But they most definitely were not well educated on the dangers of smoking back in the 70s. That gives away my age. My mom smoked cigarettes from the time she was a young teenager until she had grandkids, when she was finally able to quit. She smoked a lot, straight through all 4 of her pregnancies, through breastfeeding all day, every day. She didn't have someone there to tell her how dangerous this was. I don't know why it's so nerve-wracking to talk to you people. I know you. It's the weirdest thing in the world. All 3 of my older brothers were under 6 pounds, with the smallest being 4.5 pounds, but they were all healthy. I was born June 27th. My due date was September 29th. I came into the world angry and half-cooked. I weighed 1 pound, 12 ounces, and I've spent the rest of my life trying to find that missing weight. My dad's hand was bigger than my whole body. I spent the first 3 months of my life in an incubator at Kaiser's Pediatric ICU with breathing tubes, feeding tubes, and every other tube imaginable attached to my tiny body. I was not a pretty infant. More than looking vaguely like an alien, which I can admit, I actually was the literal poster child at Kaiser for the booklet that parents would get when they got micro-preemies. I was on the cover. Throughout my childhood, I struggled with breathing problems because my lungs were not fully developed. I was diagnosed with childhood interstitial lung disease. My lips were a continual shade of violent blue. Violet, not violent. My skin was opaque, nearly see-through. I would stop breathing regularly, and they would flick the bottom of my feet to remind me to breathe. Everything in my life was a chore. I had regular and continuous ear infections well into my elementary school years. I can remember in kindergarten being walked to the nurse's office by my teacher because I stopped breathing, and they would just remind me to breathe. It was a strange time. So my mom and dad kept me in swimming all throughout my, after seconds, all throughout my childhood to help develop stronger lungs. As they began to know better, they began to do better. My dad stopped smoking when I was 5. My mom started smoking outside, but she didn't quit altogether until my adulthood. Had they been educated about the dangers back in the 70s, they would not have had to carry around the guilt that they still carry around about my childhood struggles. And I would not have to be a resiliency success story. But wouldn't it be nice for our community's kids if they don't have to go through that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Hello again.
Hello again. I'll be quick. I just wanted to remind, some of you were on the ad hoc committee for the secondhand smoke multi-unit housing ad hoc committee, where we looked at all of this with city and county back in, I think it was 2016. And I just wanted to remind the story. Chris probably remembers that we had a community member that had complained about secondhand smoke. She was in a smoke-free lease, but her neighbors were allowed to smoke in the apartment right next door. She talked to the neighbors, she talked to the landlord, they sealed up everything, the windows, the exhausts. The primary problem was the smoke from the neighbor. She sat and smoked in her house 24/7, would come through the bathroom vent. The kids' toothbrushes smelled like smoke even after they sealed up her apartment. The owner of that complex was a corporation down in Oakland. As TUP back then, I called the owner back then. They said, we've never had a complaint. You talk up here, they said they have complaints, they filed. It was one of those situations. She was actually pregnant at the time. She had 2 children, and her partner was a smoker. But he smoked outside, he took off his coat, would come inside, wash his hands. So they understood the dangers of secondhand smoke. They also understand the liberties of having an adult and choosing to smoke, but not affecting their children. So she ended up going into premature labor, flown down to Oakland. They said that a child that's a preemie, similar to the story of Amira, has much higher risk of SIDS and complications when their lungs are that small. She ended up choosing to live with her mom in Klamath, 45 minutes, arguably, with road construction away from emergency health care until her lease was finally, she was let out of her lease only because it was the end of the actual initial contract agreement. So she ended up finding housing outside of a multi-unit complex, which we know today is even harder than it was back in 2016 to find housing, especially when you're on limited income. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Good morning.
I'm Christina Mendoza from the Public Health Week Office. I am here to advocate for the pregnant women and children who live in multi-unit housing and exposed to secondhand smoke. A point to keep in mind is even if you don't smoke, breathing in someone else's smoke can be deadly too. According to the CDC, secondhand smoke can travel into an apartment from other apartments and common areas through doorways, cracks in walls, electrical lines, ventilation systems, and plumbing. Heating, air conditioning, and ventilation systems cannot eliminate exposure to secondhand smoke. In fact, these systems can distribute secondhand smoke throughout the building. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, millions of children are breathing in secondhand smoke in their own homes. Secondhand smoke can be especially harmful to children because their lungs are still developing. Their lungs may never grow to their full potential, or they could develop lung cancer or heart disease. When a pregnant woman is exposed to secondhand smoke, their baby is exposed to harmful chemicals and could lead to serious health problems, including miscarriage, premature birth, low birth weight, SIDS, and learning disabilities. According to the Surgeon General, there is no safe level of secondhand smoke exposure, and the home is the main place where pregnant women and children are exposed to secondhand smoke. Smoke-free multi-unit housing policies could improve air quality improve health, and reduce secondhand smoke exposure. On behalf of the pregnant women and children and the Public Health Week Office, we hope you pass the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, I will close public comment on this item. Bring it back to the board for any comments. Nobody. Okay, we've been at this for 2 hours. What is the board's wishes? Do we break for a few minutes?
We're almost done.
We are almost done. Okay, we'll move on to item 19, introducing an ordinance establishing regulations for smoke-free multi-unit housing and designate county council to prepare a summary as requested by county council.
Move to approve.
We have a
I will
motion
second.
to
I will second.
approve and 2 seconds.
Okay, I did. Not Valerie, I did.
Supervisor Borges is claiming that one. That's fine. Is there any public comment on the multi-unit housing ordinance? No public comment. We'll bring it back to the board then. Would you poll the vote, please?
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Moving on to our budget transfers, approve and adopt budget transfers 01-01 in the amount of $25,000 within the information technology budget unit. Item 21 is approve and adopt budget transfer 01-03 in the amount of $6,600 within the building maintenance and jail budget. And item 22, approve the budget transfer 01-05 in the amount of $10,000 within the public nuisance budget unit.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman, as read into the record.
We have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second. Is there any public comment on the budget transfers? Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the board. Kylie, would you pull the vote, please?
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Item 23 now, approve and authorize the chair to sign and send a comment letter on the changes to the state fire hazard severity zone maps to the office of the state fire marshal as requested by Supervisor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to keep these comments fairly brief. The board report was fairly well put together by the Community Development Department, and it emphasizes areas of concern in Del Norte County where we have conflicts essentially with the current mapping that was conducted. I think our comments that have been presented in that letter that we hopefully approve today will present our case to the State Fire Marshal's Office that there's some mapping inconsistencies here. Where this gets into be problematic is just basically with our last discussion around the housing element. That's just one example of how we let the state essentially oversee processes that we should have more control over locally. So anyways, my hope is that we approve this letter today to go forward.
Very good. Is there any public comment on this letter? Yes.
First, I had every intention to attend that meeting. However, I wrote down Thursday and I showed up and nobody was there because it was the day before. So I apologize for that. Secondly, have you followed the money? Because there was a bill, and I can't find it anymore, that they passed okay, so that they determine how you're considered a high-risk area based upon financial information, and this bill said that we weren't privy to that information. So that's something that needs to be checked into. Please. Thank you.
Thank you for that
Oh,
comment.
and by the way, I don't remember you going through 21, did you?
Well, I would have to ask Kylie.
You
Yes, yes, I did read
Yes,
through
you did.
21. Yes.
And I do agree with those public comments. I want to emphasize this because we addressed this with Chief McRae, who came up here and discussed this with us. The state has yet to release the data that specifically goes into the model that creates these zones. That is obviously part of our letter, but it is the transparency that we're looking for. So we could obviously have something to fight why these classifications occurred.
Absolutely. Any other public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. We have any comments from the board?
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
And we have a second. Kylie, will you poll the vote?
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. And I believe the only thing left to do is the consent agenda. Is that correct? Okay, at this time, we'll take up the consent agenda.
Request that we pull 11 and 12
11 and 12.
for separate.
Okay. Pull 11 and 12 for a separate vote. And I am going to pull number 2, I believe, is the committee appointment list. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda minus item 2, 11, and 12?
In my opinion, number 9 wasn't clear. You're voting on a memorandum of understanding that was, I mean, it doesn't tell you how much you're going to spend, and it mentioned the word fellows and interns, and that implies males, does it not? And so it was just very confusing, and it wasn't explanatory, and it was a bunch of crap, as far as I'm concerned, because that's the way they intended it. There's no transparency there.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Good afternoon now, Board of Supervisors. It's with no satisfaction that I stand before you requesting you consider the consequences of always approving consent agenda items. Similar to the strategic plan, and we've seen an abuse of the consent agenda. To say I've been disappointed is an understatement, and I wish I could regain some communication, but it seems like all my questions go unanswered now. So, very frustrating. County council won't answer me, supervisors won't answer me. From a concerned citizen's perspective, it appears this board historically thinks it's sovereign from justifying your policy. Homelessness is a big problem. And yes, we want to take care of our people. There's no doubt. But how we go about that and only addressing the consequences without dealing with some of the problems, it's not good. What grade would you give the Department of Health and Human Services? We can't fill positions. They have a masking suggestion on today's agenda, and yet they don't even follow it themselves, right? We have a guidance from last March. There's nothing new from last March from the same department. I'm asking you to vote no to number 4, the recruitment and retention pay for the Department of Health and Human Services. These recruitment and retention pays, they should be going to the Sheriff's Department or the juvenile hall employees. But they're not. And we see this trend with you guys over and over. I'm asking you to vote no on number 8. It's $1.2 million. How is that consensual for mental health? Yeah, everybody needs mental health. Here, strategic plan again. We have one department sending our money outside the county for youth mental health, yet we're closing juvenile hall. Where's the balance there? Let's take this $1.92 million and give it to juvenile hall employees. How are we allocating our funds? The agreement is for $3.75 a minute for services. We don't have somebody that can help kids in our area. We have to send them off. Please vote no on number 8. Also vote no on number 9. As it was stated,
Brandon,
this
if
is
you'd wrap it up,
kind
your
of,
time has
kind of
expired.
vague. Yes, you have these. I'm sure you've seen these. I sent these to you, although no one responded. Give them for the minutes. Thank you. Number 9, again, internships. Great. Why is it always the Department of Health and Human Services? Intern the sheriff.
Brandon, wrap
for
it up.
juvenile.
Your time's expired.
Number 9, a state of emergency. How many emergencies do we need? What was the condition of extreme peril?
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay. Close public comment period for these items and bring it back to the board. And Kylie, will you pull the vote?
Chair, I don't have a motion or a second on the consent agenda.
I guess we should get one of those
I'll
then.
make a motion to approve the ones that were not pulled, and the ones pulled were 2, 11, as well as 12.
12. Thank you for that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Now would you pull the vote, Kylie? Thank you.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, Supervisor Wilson, go ahead with your items there.
My comment on item 11 is that we're pursuing this lease. I have experience dealing with leased vehicles. We did so with the city police department many years ago. My recommendation is if we're going to go forward, and I'm sure we will with this lease agreement, is that we cautiously use this. We do not want to be leasing vehicles that traditionally and historically have gotten very little utilization in their respective departments. If we're going to be spending this kind of money on leasing a vehicle, they should be vehicles that are being constantly utilized. They should be vehicles that are getting a lot of miles on them, and that they require replacements often. I also, do not want to see our department heads getting vanity cars, basically getting upscale vehicles so that they have, something of a perk just in having the fact that they're leasing a vehicle. So, if we do it wisely, it can be a benefit. However, if we do it large scale, we can abuse and end up spending a lot of needless money on vehicles that are just sitting on parking lots and not being actively used in a lease. Thank you.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Agree. Is there any public comment on item number 11?
Make a motion to approve item number 11, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Kylie, will you pull the vote, please?
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
No.
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. Okay, Supervisor Wilson, number 12.
Number 12, I'm sorry Jerry left. But I just didn't want something to be voted on consent agenda that personally, I know the Cochrans have dedicated a lot of their time, not only Jerry, but all the Cochrans, to the VFW and Veterans Affairs, and have served for years and years and years advocates and in the Veterans Affairs. And his dedication, his love, and his service to our community for veterans has been long and dedicated, and he has been a blessing to those in the veterans that need those services. And I was very happy to see that his name was being utilized and put in as the volunteer for the Veterans Affairs in this position. He's been long retired, but his dedication and love is, for veteran services and for those that need it. I just didn't want it to go unrecognized, unappreciated, and nothing being said. And I'm sorry he left, because I have nothing but a lot of respect for Jerry and his family for all that they've done for veterans in Del Norte County. Thank you.
I'll second your motion if you make it, Supervisor Wilson.
I move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing no public comment, Kylie, would you pull the vote?
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. And lastly is the item that I pulled, which is the committee appointment list. I made a mistake when compiling this list. Did not recall, or it did not remember that last year we made changes to the admin manual to change the name of the goals committee to the technical advisory committees, which is more accurate. And in that, missed a few assignments. So in front of you today, there is those assignments that are made up. Also, in doing these assignments, there is alternates in just a few of these, three actually. And I was simply following the format of the goals committee. I would ask that if it be okay with the board, if we would just eliminate the alternate positions on the technical advisory committees, accept the assignments on the technical advisory committees as presented to you here, and also make one change to the committee appointment list, and that would be the last chance grade stakeholder group as is presented in the board. I have Supervisor Wilson as the primary and Starkey as the alternate, and I would like to reverse that to put Starkey in as the primary and Wilson as the alternate. Supervisor Starkey had been the alternate on that in the past, and Congressman Huffman's office would appreciate her taking the primary role in that, and I don't have any trouble accommodating that as well. So that is the changes I'm proposing.
I have no problems accommodating that as long as Supervisor Wilson is good with it.
As an
His
alternate, yeah. Being an alternate, I will be on there and active, so yeah, I have no issue at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any public comment on this item?
I think that the 5th District Supervisor should be doing it.
If you have a public comment, Linda, would you mind coming up to the podium?
The 5th District Supervisor, this is in his district. I get it that you are doing it. For whatever reason, all this changed. And now all of a sudden, you're assigning things out of district to somebody that doesn't even live in that district. So that doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, did we get a motion?
We have not.
Chair, should we read into the record the 3 committees that aren't listed so they know what they're called? Do you mind if I do that for the record?
Very good. That would be good. Thank you.
So the 3 committees that were not listed, one is Technical Advisory Committee number 6, Customer Focused Government. The appointments are Supervisor Starkey and Supervisor Short. The other Technical Advisory Committee is number 9, Partnerships. The appointments are Supervisor Borges and Supervisor Wilson. And the other Technical Advisory Committee is number 10, which is Infrastructure, and that is Supervisor Howard and Supervisor Short.
Thank you, Kylie.
Yep.
I'd make a motion as currently read into the record.
Thank you. Got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. Kylie, would you poll the vote, please?
Supervisor Starkey?
Yes.
Supervisor Borges?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Howard?
Yes.
Chair Short?
Yes. And Kylie, I believe we covered it.
We
Is that
did.
correct? Very good. With that, I will bring this meeting to a close and adjourn us until the next regularly scheduled meeting, February 14th, 2023.